All right, we can start just like Harvey.
Let's just talk, okay?
When and where were you born?
When and where? Well, as the story has been told me, it was in Hatch, New Mexico. The farm was considered Salem, so that was a few miles outside of Hatch, five or so, 4 or 5 miles out of Hatch, the farm. But Mama got taken to uh, old Doc Steele, who had the only clinic around in his home,
Hmm.
and his wife was a nurse. So that was the healthcare facility in Hatch, and there I went. And I don't remember if Daddy was allowed, probably not allowed in the room or whatever else. And I don't rem- I,
Hmm.
now I probably knew the story before, is like how long Mama was in labor, but that's gone away from my memory now. But
Hmm.
anyway, I got born and went uh, immediately home. I'm sure after a few hours or whatever. And what else you wanted to know how much I weighed and all that? I weighed like 8.5 pounds. I was not a small baby. Mother did not have small baby, except Nell. Nell was a 6 pound something. But all the
Hmm.
rest of us,
And she was the last.
yeah,
Yeah.
cow's tail. Yeah, 11 years after Reba. But the rest of
Oh, I
us
didn't know it
were
was that
8 to 10
long.
on the weight.
Hmm.
Or old Doc Steele's scales were totally wrong. Who knows?
Hmm.
Surely he knew. I mean, he had delivered tons of babies by then, so I'm sure by head size and everything else, he could have probably guessed it. But we Mother and Daddy were living with Grandpa and Grandma in their house with a few teenage boys that came and went,
Hmm.
up to four at any given time.
Would they pay rent?
Oh heavens, no! But of course they worked or whatever, and some were still in junior high, high school, whatever was in, because I'm not positive of the ages, except they were getting on up to those guys, Daddy's brothers, on up to teenagers. I mean, I've heard the story straight from it's very hard on Mother. Can you imagine? Newborn baby. You just got married, and 9 months later, I literally almost, I come. Well, I think it was, well, they married January of 1950, January
Mm-hmm.
8th of 1950, and I was born November 5th of
Mm-hmm.
1950. Did that answer all the questions? Anyway, back to the thing. It's like uh, the kind of elongated room, kind of no wider than this area, and probably to the end of where your thing is in the old farmhouse, or not quite, was one bedroom that
Hmm.
was the boys' um, bedroom. Um, but depending, I'm thinking there were only two beds in there, like two double beds,
Mm-hmm.
stuffed mattresses that weren't given sizes or whatever that much those days. And sometimes, if the boys wanted to be on the bed, not a quilt or two on the floor, it was an old wood floor kind of a thing, they would turn and sleep, with feet hanging off. Three to the bed or four to the bed, whoever
Mm-hmm.
was there, kind of a thing. They could sleep two to the bed, or somebody had to go down on the floor, and then I'm sure there's a fight or whatever. I've heard this from the uncles cutting up within family gathering or around a campfire, deer hunting or something like that. The subject has come up various and sundry times, and I just remember all of them saying that. But Mother shared it from the standpoint of a new mother bringing a baby home, and she said, first of all, I was of course, nursed baby, but I was a spitty up baby. Something wasn't right. Constant spitty up, and I was getting thinner and thinner. And that's before they, you know, take them back at a week, take them back at 2 weeks, or whatever. All those things. And uh, the story was that I heard many times, and from many of them, was Grandpa Gillis says, that baby needs some raw cow's milk or she's going to die. So I got raw cow's milk and I pretty much perked up. Decided I'd be just fine. But still, yeah, then mother said that she didn't feel like she could share her own. I mean, after all, Grandma Gillis had 8 children, and therefore mother didn't feel like that, and she didn't know. So it's like, when are you feeding that baby through feeding that baby yet? She said that was with the cow's milk in the bottle at that time. Then he wanted to grab up that baby because Grandpa Gillis loved babies, and then bounce, bounce, bounce on the knee, and then puke, puke, puke came the milk. So, they'd feed me some more. So I guess I got through that fine. But all through the years, clear down to my babies, I watched Grandpa Gillis like nothing better than to put that baby on his knee and sing his little songs. He was the song singer, and bounce those babies on his knee.
Now, were your parents living at Grandpa Gillis or Grandpa Fulbright's house?
Oh, good to say. No, they got married in Oklahoma, in Castle, Oklahoma, at Grandpa Fulbright and Grandma Viola Fulbright's house, and spent one night and immediately left for New Mexico, back to New Mexico with Grandpa Gillis and Grandma Gillis. And there they were. They went right there, and
the whole family just went straight there.
Well, not all the boys, and the boys weren't there.
Well,
It was just Grandma. I don't know. I think probably, I don't know that I was ever told that, but the Gillises had been there, and they still had, Grandpa had sisters living in the Oklahoma area, not in Castle, but nearby, farm close to Okemah, and Hazel was in Okemah. That was a first cousin of Grandma, of Aunt Louise, of the boys, of Daddy, a first cousin of Daddy. And I never thought about it, but it's like, they certainly weren't in a hotel. There wasn't a hotel to be had, kind of a thing. But that's probably who they stayed with, and then attended the wedding, and then, went back to Hazel's and spent the night and loaded up and came and, drove the, whatever it was, 30 miles or something to Castle. No, it wasn't that far. The few miles to Castle, picked up Mother and Daddy and left for New Mexico. So yes, then immediately Mother and Daddy were living with Grandma and Grandpa Gillis in New Mexico.
Was there anyone left in Timbo in Arkansas?
No. When they moved, and this was great, I know a little bit more of the dating and the story of surrounding that, because whatever year that was, Mother and Daddy and all of us girls and Aunt Louise got to go to Timbo. And so I was trying to do a little bit of what you're doing now on, taking notes from just hearing Daddy and Aunt Louise talk back and forth. You remember when old and I heard about, I'm trying to think of one of the Gillis uncles, I think he probably was, or whatever, but he was called, another conversation. You're going to have to do a lot of cut and paste, Rig. He could marry and bury people, but he wasn't a preacher. Wasn't Judge, and Aunt Louise said it's so funny, so hillbilly funny. There were a lot of things that got her right back into that mode of how, they talked then, that I just loved during that time. And I tried to write it down that way and record it, some of it. So I didn't get near as much as I'd love to have had. But no one. Oh, do you want me to tell that story, though, that was so surreal?
Where you were recognized?
Where Aunt Louise was recognized. Yeah. Okay, when they left, Aunt Louise was kind of like 18, 19 or so. Daddy, who was the fourth born, was coming up on 11, is how it was. And they were going to leave, there were several stories surrounding it. They were going to leave Timbo finally, for sure, following Uncle Tom, because Uncle Tom, Martin, had married to one of Grandpa Gillis's sisters, Aunt Ord. Most people called her Ordy. And they had already moved to Oklahoma, to Last Chance, Oklahoma, and opened up a little store, of which I think did I show you the pictures? Or did you get a picture? Oh my goodness.
Oh, wait.
Last Chance and someone on a horse and
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, it's not a hillside, but it's kind of a slant to it, I think.
Was there? Well, the roof was. Maybe you're thinking about the little slap.
I think I remember seeing that
slapboard thing with a big Coca-Cola sign.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was it. That was his store/mercantile. Anyway, so he was established, and he always went to where, I don't know, he either bought or rented a little farmland and kind of like enticed, I don't know what conversations were like, but Grandpa, who Uncle Tom Martin always called, and everybody else did, either Mr. Gillis or W.A., because he was William Arthur, so it was W.A., y'all come on now, we're set, and there's a little piece here, y'all can farm and a little rent house, who knows, I don't know where they lived when they moved to, there. What they were living in was a little, like everything else up there in the hills, up a holler, as they all said. Oh, let's do the pieces where my hair all falls out. Mixes with gingers on the floor. And it was really cold when we were going on that trip in visiting, because we went to the two different seminaries, the Ramsey Seminary and the Perry Seminary. Did I say seminary? Cemetery. And this is going to be the worst interview ever.
And the Perry Cemetery, I'm guessing that's all like Iva's family.
Well, a lot of, it's like there are about 4 families up the hollers and all that Timbo area, covering lots of miles, just the hill country, and a lot of intermarried family hillbillies.
Yeah.
So and the Ramseys and the Perrys, and some of the Ramseys came and lived in Las Cruces later on. I was a teenager before I made those connections, because it was a different name. I never knew that they came from Timbo to start with, things like that. It was wonderful. But what is now, my mind is still holding on to this. What's another word for judge? I won't be able to go on and get that out of my mind, because Aunt Louise said it's so cool. Squire. Squire Perry. He was a Perry, and he was whatever certification he had. And either I'm dreaming this up, or Aunt Louise said then, I never knew before, that he had a wooden leg, and I'm pretty sure he lost that in the Civil War. But he had however far, a wooden leg, and got teased. He didn't like to be teased, because he was a Squire Perry, and he could marry people and whatever. But he did, like, I'm going to talk like Aunt Louise was telling the story. He did just like everybody else in the hills. You had to walk the hills to get anywhere, and you're always walking on a slant, So he got teased a lot because of the true wooden leg or whatever else, or how he had to walk on the hills to be more careful with that wooden leg, etc. And and it was harder for him probably, but he always dressed up, whatever dress up was in. He probably had a coat and some sort of a button up to the next shirt, not like the old overalls and work clothes that everybody else had. So she said, I just remember as a kid, and that's what she'd say, I just remember as a kid, he didn't like to be teased, but he's teased a lot, but because his Squire Perry, he could marry people and he could bury people. His Squire Perry, that's where you went if you need anything worked out, or deeded lands, or disputes and that sort of thing. That's what she's telling me, and that's how she's telling it. I've got it written down pretty verbatim, note wise. I was not most of the Gillises, and certainly Aunt Louise too, pretty shy in sharing information. So I tried not to make a big deal of it, or later on I'm jotting down the notes, or sometimes even that night. But if it was really good like that with lots of details and the way she said it, I tried to put it verbatim and not let her know it. Otherwise she'd clam up, absolutely clam up. Which she did clam up. You said you wanted to hear that story. That is so unreal. It's just like a movie. No one would believe it. I've told a few of the Gillises around, but no one would believe that the way it came out. It was just too over the top. Spielberg wouldn't do it a scene that way, because everybody would think it was like, yeah, right. Unbelievable. Totally caught Aunt Louise surprised. We're in Timbo, and the funny thing is an old tumble down shack that they're still using for storage for something right by the one mercantile and 2 gas pumps. They weren't super old gas pumps. They're fairly modernized. But so we stopped there for the bathroom, and we didn't need gas. We didn't get gas, but we went in for snacks and drinks, kind of thing. And I think we already did a couple of pictures with Daddy standing outside of that shack, because somebody put just a handwritten cardboard sign on there that said Timbo City Hall, just
I
for
remember
fun.
that.
Yeah, just
that
for
photo.
fun. And if it wasn't our trip, it was done before, because Mother and Daddy had made a couple of different trips. They did with the other Gillis men and wives, which was great timing, because then, obviously, two died before very long, and a sister-in-law and whatever. So they had a good trip then. And we have some good pictures from that. But we were just trying to trace to where, like, us grown girls now, we'd heard stories, and of course, but we couldn't picture Timbo. Daddy still said, well, up the holler, and, well, the schoolhouse was like this, and yes, you really did have to walk several miles down to the schoolhouse, kind of thing, and all of that. And we weren't sure if we were getting the right images of, well, how steep, whatever. Well, Daddy would just say, well, pretty steep, and very rocky, yeah. And big timber back in, a lot of that's been cleared. But truly, the old cabin foundations, which you could still get to, they did on their trips a few years before, but we didn't. It'd been raining, it was very icy, when we're dirt roads, etc. We weren't quite sure, because it was socked in and foggy as at the time that we made it there on our day to go. So we just kind of, Daddy talked a little bit more about what it was like with, how it was situated and how far it was up to what they called the ice caves, which were true ice caves. Their summer treat was to go up there and swing on the vines and, splash around in the water, but take lemons up. It's like, where they got lemons, I don't know, but I guess there were shipments of, lemons coming to their mercantile, what he called grocery stores then, because Aunt Louise talked a lot about how, well, we pretty much made everything we needed, and only went to town when we had to, or to get loaded up on coffee, coal oil, things like that, flour, staples, etc., in a very big way. And that was a big deal, wagon and the mules, and down, and usually stay a night and that kind of thing, and then back home. So that didn't happen very often. That was to Mountain View. That was the closest town, and that's where we were staying at a historic inn when we went. And more fun stories from that too. Great place. I want to go back there. I would love to take you grown grandkids. Wouldn't that be cool? That would be so cool. You would enjoy that so much. Oh yeah, that'd be way cool. If I don't die first. Trying to stay alive. Okay, and back to Timbo. So we really didn't get to see, but obviously we're seeing other rock foundations, because I've seen in pictures, just rough-hewn, some knot holes had fallen out or whatever, might have been stuffed with something or whatever. But a porch, had to have a porch, and it was high enough up from the rocks to where the hound dogs could crawl under and get warm. Maybe that's where you raised your pig when it got cold, or whatever. Truly, that's lots of surrounding stories, not just them, but hearing Grandma Gillis and Grandpa Gillis talk about that, because she worked the fields too. She worked the fields pregnant and with toddlers. And she talked about her and Louise probably was no more than 3 years old when she started to help get up early and cook in the mills, which took them through whether they're going to school or whether they're working the fields. Buttermilk biscuits like that. And still, I think about those. It was what all of us grandkids had stayed. And of course, I stayed the longest because I lived with them the longest, basically, until I was 4. And then still went and spent nights all the time, weekends all the time, because Mother had other babies she's tending to. So I was very close to Grandma and Grandpa Gillis and the cooking and the stories, that came in bits and pieces. It's just like my poetry. I don't dare to sit y'all down and say, now we'll have a reading of some of my latest poetry for an hour. Nothing like that. You just had to pick up bits and pieces. And then you think, when you got old enough, especially young married age and adulthood, you're thinking, man, why didn't I ask some more questions about that? You're getting to do some of this, but anyway, because you're thankfully into the genealogy and this, the supporting stories. So before my voice gives out, back to the coolest of all of the Timbo stories was that fog's not really lifting. It's getting, the rain, sleety rain is getting more icy. We're freezing Aunt Louise to death. She'd make me look big. She's a teeny little thing. And we told her to just pack light because there was all of us and we were all just trying to cram in with, one bag apiece and all that. So she's got this little sweater in her suitcase and she's freezing to death. So she runs around looking like she looks like a little Indian squaw with a blanket around her shoulders, and then even couldn't stand that because the wind is blowing too. And it was just a cold time that we were able to go in the fall. And so here we go. We're at the Timbo one business. Well, 2 businesses. The other thing, you look across the road, the 2-lane highway that takes you through Timbo, and you look up this carved out hillside, and up on top is Dads and Brads, and we have coffee cup mugs to prove it, but they're cheap. So some of if you really used yours and washed them, the labeling is coming off. It was just white coffee cups with whatever. We all bought one, we went there. But you get hamburgers and fries and whatever. And we were the only customers, but that was probably a big run for that day for the guy, very nice and chatty and whatever. So that's where we ultimately ended up getting a burger and fries or whatever we had, before we left Timbo to go back to Mountain View. But in the interim, as we stopped for the bathroom and snackies, there we walk into this store, and it's had to be original for many decades, most of it. I think it been added to and probably some different windows replaced or whatever else, but really dark, really dark and smoky, because sure enough, I mean, it's a great place to get warm, and you had to go outside and around to the bathroom that had been built on, years ago. And they still kept, I think, besides that town hall storage fallen down wooden building, there was an outhouse that they still kept for the effect that, used to go with this filling station / mercantile. But no, it was a modern bathroom, and, but you had to go outside, around, in and back. So that was a process, and you had to take turns doing that. But anyway, pushing in. I kind of stuck with Aunt Louise because it's kind of like she was my runaround buddy anyway, since she had moved. Well, she hadn't moved back at that point. She became my runaround buddy. But I'm real close to Aunt Louise. And what? We got simpatico. How's that? We got simpatico. And just in helping her walk, get around or whatever, I just stuck with her. And then whatever our turn was for doing whatever, it was like me and Aunt Louise. So I was right behind her as we're pushing and going in the door. I think Daddy might have walked in there first, or he was still outside around, scuffing around, looking at some of the outlying junk thrown around, pieces of old whatever equipment. There would seem to be like there was a old broken down like 40s logging truck, in all kinds of pieces, the bed barely there and the truck, whatever. And I'm sure they kept that there for effect too. So he may have not come in. I think it might have been Aunt Louise and I both pushing through the door. One of those, heavy doors, had some glass on the front, but then you push in and you think, man, of course it was foggy, like I said, foggy and overcast and rainy, spitzy rain there, but like icy rain, the icy pellets. And in we go, and it's smoky and very dark, so your eyes are having to adjust. First of all, it's like, oh, well, there's an old pot-bellied stove, might have been original to the place, like there it is. I thought, oh my goodness, looking around, they got the normal, 2-year-old snacks on the. Does she need something?
She may need out.
Here, let me. I'm closest. Let me let her out. We've been doing this just fine. You go outside. Go see the woodpecker. Tell the woodpecker come back. Okay. I'm ready.
All cut out.
Yeah.
Bits and pieces.
Bless your heart, you'll have to. Sniffles and whatever, but this will keep my voice going.
But we left off. Papa Johnny he's looking
Stuffing
outside.
Around outside. Yeah. Well, I'm getting ginger hairs now everywhere. Probably the pillow. Yes, the pillow.
Oh, I get it.
It's all right. Yeah.
I always
I'm fine.
forget that, it's going to get all over me, and I always wear black sweatpants.
Well, when Sarah and Wade had their, what was his name? Xylo.
Mm.
Oh my gosh. And he had the stiff hairs. I swear to this day, I can wash something that I hadn't worn in a long time or whatever, and have one. It's like, where did a stiff white Xylo? Seriously. I mean, it could last for years. They just go in, they hide us like a sticker or something. Mm-hmm. So all of their house. And then when we're loading up to get in the car, Wade said the same thing. He said, these, it's Xylo hairs, of course. It's everywhere. And by static electricity, it's on all the dash and whatever else. He said, this car will, go away after years still being full of Xylo hair. I know, some guy, poodles are good for that. I rarely had, and he was had a problem and didn't have the best of poodle hair, but nonetheless, I never had to worry about much hair ever over the place. Okay. Well, this will show that me and you both liked avocado, huh? You can leave some of that in. A good part. Okay. So we push open I'm going to make this just like it's a scene because that's what it was. You could not make this up. Because we didn't know what to expect, Okay, I help her push the door. It's pretty heavy. It's got that, glass piece in it, long. About the only light source. Okay, in we go. See the pot-bellied stove, etc. It's like, of course, it's toasty warm. And I probably said some comment, it's like, oh, well, it's sure warmer in here. That's good. And I think Aunt Lou's saying something. Well, I just need a little Coke, She like, wonder if they have bottles or cans or something like that. I said, well, we'll just look around. All of a sudden, we hear this scuffling. And, your eyes have adjusted about it at that point, but there's a scuffling. So from the pot-bellied stove, there's like a shadowed or darkened corner right back here. And the shuffling sound is an old man getting up. with kind of like widened eyes like this. It's like, okay, tourists, yay, or whatever. It's like that's his corner. It's almost kind of thing. When you think it and look back on it, you can bring out the best of it. But seriously, remember it so clear because it was, and Aunt Louise and I were like, oh, kind of a thing. But pretty obvious that he wasn't there to shop. He's there getting warm by that pot-bellied stove, etc. But his look, oh my gosh, he had on nasty old frayed overalls with, of course, one brad either unhooked or broken off for whatever reason, it's dangling. Seriously, he's got, you can tell he's not a bearded man. He's just an unshaven man of probably about a week or two growth, whatever, and all messy hair. It's like, I don't comb my hair. Who needs to comb my hair? I hadn't had a bath since last, November or something. But, there may have been some teeth missing. I don't know if he was, without teeth totally. I don't quite remember that part. But up he comes, and then the whole effect is, a nasty old long-sleeved flannel shirt. At least it wasn't red union underwear, but an old flannel shirt of some sort, very worn, and the boots. The overall legs were stuffed down in the boots, and literally, I hope he had socks on. I don't know, just because it was so cold. But I don't know that part, but I do know that there were no shoelaces, or either they were broken and just, hanging in the holes. The tongues were out like this. And it was just like the darndest, and it was just literally shuffling. Maybe they were with a pair of boots that had been bought and they didn't even fit him. Who knows? But the image of him was crazy. And it was, I could tell Aunt Louise totally tensed up, and she's backing toward me and touching me already because I'm right behind her, as we're going to go to find snacks. So she's, just from a person and movement, and then we're registering, it's a person. And he's very slowly, and he probably hurting like me in the hips or whatever, getting up and shuffling over, and we kind of do this little dive down the line because there's some refrigerated where they've got pop and water and whatever over there. So we go over there. Yeah, they got Coke right here. You want a bottle or you want a can? I think I'll take it in the can. Okay, we get her little can of Coke. And I said, well, I really don't want any of these. I said, Daddy used to always get. I said, Daddy will probably come in here and want to get those crazy corns, right? Is that what they call them? They're hard, crunchy corn, lots of salt on them. Ugh. So I used to like them, but Daddy sure enough. And anyway, I think maybe Daddy had come in by then, and maybe whoever had asked for the key and using the restroom back in, and we're funneling. So we're kind of back and got a line going or starting with the Aunt Louise being the first. She sets her little Coke up there, and then it's high. It's a high counter and just the one guy there. And there is a small window behind him, that's lighting a little more. Him, her, the counter. But only, it still remains dark around. It was a very dark place. Maybe they didn't even have the lights on back there. Or if they had lights, I don't know. And here he comes up to the counter. And it's kind of a long counter, maybe the length of this table. And I do it with my hand, but my shoulder hurts. And he went wham like this. I don't think he ever took his eyes off Aunt Louise. He'd just been staring at her, And he's probably her age or better, He went wham. I'm going to say this on tape, Rigby, but that's because I'm quoting this old guy, like I said. I do a step back, I'm not covering, his sight to her, but I'm kind of like in line, just kind of standing here oddwise. But I did a step back because he went wham, because we're thinking, maybe the poor old guy's touched, and he could be a little bit scary. I was thinking more for Aunt Louise. she jumps. Cause I mean, he went wham, but at the same time, he's saying, "By God, you's WA's gal, ain't ya?" Just so excited, and that's exactly what he said, quote unquote. Aunt Louise, then she's big-eyed, and she's looking. She says, "I'm Louise Gillis, Louise Brownlee." And he said, "I knew it. You recognized her. She wasn't over 20 when they left there." So, unbelievable. And, of course, embarrassment level at that point, because I know Aunt Louise and her personality. She could not have got her change purse out, paid for her little Coke, and got out that door any faster. And she went straight to the car. And she didn't even want to go use the restroom. She just wanted out of there. So I waited in the Suburban with Aunt Louise while she's sipping her Coke. And I don't think she had a nitrogen tablet, which is what she carried in her purse. There was at another point, and that was where we're driving the curvy hills to where locals, I'm sure it's locals that were there, and etc., that would pass you, knowing that could be a head-on, it absolutely could be a head-on kind of thing. And that was scaring her to death. She made little comments trying to be okay with it all by saying, well, everything's just real curvy here, but these roads, they weren't meant more to do horse and buggy, they weren't meant to do these kind of speeds and whatever. And Reba was not driving fast; she was slowed down. We didn't know where we were going or whatever, but it was scary to have the locals passing you. but she was a little shaky, but because it had only been a little time ago that she'd taken a nitrogen tablet. When I saw that, she never said anything. I knew what she was doing. But because I know she was scared then. So now she's scared for a different reason. It's like, just don't let him ask me anything else, kind of thing. I think she was so embarrassed and so scared, and just wanted to emphasize that, yeah, a long time ago we left, and I'm Louise Brownlee. She didn't say I'm a widow woman or nothing like that. Lord help her if she had us, probably. But who was he? An old boyfriend? Because this is the backstory, as Riley would say. Grandpa Gillis, one of the reasons he left there, one of the stories that Aunt Louise told me was that she was fixing, that's how she said, well, I was fixing to probably, at least Daddy thought so, meaning her own dad. At least Daddy thought so. I was fixing to marry, and said the name. And I don't remember the name to this day, but a local boy. And evidently those peoples were feuding. And there was truly a lot of that going on. Oh, they were probably so intermarried, they shouldn't have been,
Like the Hatfields and McCoys.
Truly, very truly. So part of the reason, or maybe a good excuse, was that she said, Daddy always said, he said, he'd go to his grave for he'd see me married to that boy, because he wasn't no good. And maybe he was. Maybe he was mean or lazy or whatever. She never went on, and I didn't ask those questions. But that was the story. And I thought, oh my gosh, that would be just way over the top. Or maybe that's why she was so scared, that knowing or not knowing that could have been him, or that he would have, in recognizing her after all those years, that he would have known the story, or that piece of the story, even if it wasn't him or a brother or whatever else, Didn't get, but I knew how deep that hit, so I didn't ask any more questions. I wished later on, after we got back or whatever, and she had later on, not too much later on, she moved, she got a trailer and she moved, and she said to be closer, spend a little time with the rest of my brothers. And she did 3 years. She had 3 years before she passed away with Daddy and Pete and Don and Lonnie. Lived real close to Don and Bonnie. But oh my gosh, could you develop that or not? But the look of things, like I said, it was so over the top. But the fact that that old guy, what would that make it after at least 60 years, 65 years, something like that, recognizing her and being confident of enough. She was just speaking and it was just her looks, and most of that, except when we came in, he's seeing us, we're not seeing him in the shadow yet to where it was full face. And then immediately with this, got her stuff, and then he's seeing her on this side of the face. She's paying for her little Coke at the counter. By God, you're WA's gal, ain't you? And you're just like, so, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Here she is. Yet I had to been there, but that was super good story to remember.
What was Aunt Louise like, just as a person? I know you've called her a real mountain woman.
Well, worked her tail off. I mean, all she ever did was cook and diaper and babysit and correct boys, because that was all her brothers that came down the line. And then she married and had 2 boys.
Was she the oldest?
She was the oldest. And the other really good story we got out of that was in Mountain View at the historic Mountain View Inn. It had always been a residential home, either long-term renter kind of, throughout all the eras or whatever else, or then a B&B, which has been for, a number of times. And a nice young family with teenage kids ran it. Coolest place. I would love to think that they still had it. And every morning after breakfast, in fact, you went on the long porch where they had all the rocking chairs set up, and any guests there got treated to a hour's worth of banjo, guitar, and fiddle picking concert. It was so good. There that day, and this is like, okay, let's get the breakfast dishes taken care of real quick here. The cooking started smelling great before he got out of bed and got ready and got downstairs where all of us girls were. Mother and Daddy were in the other cabins across the street, Mother and Daddy and Louise, and we thought, I made those reservations, and we thought that a better thing as we looked, and I talked to the guy, accommodations wise, so that they didn't have those steep stairs for the 3 of them. As it turned out, Mother was madder than a wet hen at me because there was only a claw-tooth bathtub, with a pull-around hole, and none of them could get in the bathtub safely, they felt, and out, so. But it's like, well, then, and Mother said, I can do those stairs anyway. And Aunt Louise said, I can do those stairs better than you, or whatever. So it's like, well, then, there's like, it was a choice with us upstairs of 3 different showers, well, then come use our shower. That's, we were, so anyway, that's how that went on accommodations. But nonetheless, of course, they came over for breakfast. Great, big, huge, old, historic table and everything. And only one other couple that were, I'd say, early 60s there, nice and friendly or whatever. And we had the coolest breakfast, waffles and bacon and eggs and grits and sausage and, oh my goodness, coffee, tea, whole milk, about whatever you wanted, some fruit, wonderful. And then went out on the porch for that concert, and they gave the lineup. We'd already seen them, their service and waitress and cooks and everything with their teenage boy, but their teenage daughter, I think was older than the son, played fiddle, I think it was, but she was either away at college or doing something else at that time, just away for some reason. Otherwise should be here, as they said, but as a fill-in, we've got the neighbor down the street kind of thing. Her name is such and such, and she's going to be playing the fiddle. She's filling in for the daughter, that normally great picking music. I mean, they could go on the road any day of the week. And oh, another cute thing about that too was for the guy, uh, a big old long-haired mama cat. He says, just watch, we'll be having another, I forget what he called, we'll be having another performer, maybe he said. Another performer joined us here just a few minutes. Once we get tuned up and started, we'll be having another performer. Wink, wink. It's like, okay, well, who comes and plays whatever. Well, it was that mama cat. Pretty soon, around the corner of the house, she came, jumps up on his lap. He's playing. He jumps up on his lap, up on his shoulder, curls around, lays down. It's like, okay, concert in process. Coolest thing. It was so cute. And are any of us getting pictures at the time? No. I don't think we had picture phones then. Did we? We might have. But at any rate, I think we're not thinking, because I had a camera, taken a few, but I didn't go back upstairs, think to get the camera. Why not? I don't know. But because I went later and got some shots of different ones sitting in the rocking chairs, and then later, all but me, taking the picture out front on the little low stone wall that said in a Mountain View historic, from here to here, whatever the dates. And that was a nice shot. But that was really cute. So that was a great process. Okay, one of the rooms downstairs, like the parlor, whatever. And they really did have, from curtains to deco to whatever, historic, and much of it, I'm sure, had been kept and used for many, many years. Everything was great and just so well done. And each of the rooms upstairs, or the bedrooms that us girls had, were fantastic too. The brass bedstead, real brass bedsteads. I think I had the one that it was 2 and 2 for the other girls. We had 3 rooms. 2 sisters, and me. This little bitty, what was probably once a little walk-in closet, had a little shower, installed in the corner, little shower, little sink on the outside, and then a twin-size bed, which they usually used as obviously when you had kids, that'd be the kid room. So I had kind of like an old kid-type quilt, the others did too, from old Chanel bedspreads to, nicely hand-done quilts. And of course, in Mountain View, there were shops that had tons of beautiful, hand-done quilts, etc. And anyway, mine was the old iron bedstead, but like for a kid or whatever, could have held a 300-pound guy, But real cool. And wood floors, and creaky wood floors, creaky, original. That was just, I wish I had the dates or on something, but 18 something to whatever. But just knowing it had always been housed as a, either renters or travelers or B&B. So we went into the parlor. It was just me and Aunt Louise. Really bright, light, frilly curtains on the windows or whatever. Sun shining in, really pretty then. And some coffee table books and a couple more books laying on an antique piece. I don't remember what the piece itself was, but a little higher up or whatever. I was in there first. I was already into a book, that had been on the coffee table, and it was surrounding the era or whatever, and Mountain View itself, etc. And Aunt Louise came around the corner. There was one step down, and she turned and she saw me reading the book. I said, I already found a book to read, Aunt Louise. This is so cool. Come in and set a spell. And she comes down, and she just turns, she looks down, she said, well, here's a book right here. This is a photo album. So she said, I'll bring that over there. So she got the photo album, came over and sat down by me and started going through it. Truly, little vignette stories surrounding a, obviously old black and white photograph of something or somebody. It seemed to be mostly people of, back when, through the years, etc. And she turns a page. I'm reading. I can't remember what now with the story. She's turned a page. She says, "Oh my goodness! Why, that's old Doc. What, Doc? Oh, I knew the word. I knew the name, and now it's gone." Starts to say Doc Holliday, but that ain't right. That's old Doc. Tip of my tongue. Maybe I'll remember it to give it to you, and you can plug it back in. Mia said that couldn't remember, and now it'll show that this is reality. Why, that's old Doc. I thought if I can hear her saying it. Why, that's old Doc. Shoot. Anyway, and I said, you knew him, and then she shows me, I glance through and read the little vignette. Sure enough, during that time, and she says old Doc so-and-so, it looked like he's probably 20 years old. He's standing there in his suit and all in a pose deal, full body, hand on the back of a chair like this, handsome young man. I said, Doctor, of course she said that because she said, he fixed my knee. And then I got the story. I said, your knee was hurt? And she says, yeah. I was probably the only one. She's thinking like she's doing this. I guess I was probably the only one went to a doctor whole time I was in Timbo, and that's up the holler, off a few miles. I said, well, what happened, and oh man, great story to hear her tell it. She said, well, I didn't break it. I did nothing, but I guess really, really bad bruised my kneecap. Couldn't think what to call it. My kneecap. One morning, she says, part of my job was that I had to go down the hill to the shack where we stored the coal oil and fill up the bucket. Did she say bucket or lantern? Bucket, because then from the bucket they used it for a number of things and filled the lantern. I think bucket. Well, it's part of my job to go down first thing and get the coal oil bucket filled up. And she says, I was carrying that up the hill, and she says, all we had was rocks. It's just a rocky old trail, so you had to be careful. You slip on. I said, I did this every day, kind of thing. She says, oh, I don't know. I was probably I may have been as much as 19 years old, or maybe as young as 8. But it's right in there somewheres, she says. And I said, okay. So she said, I fell, and she said, I went to squawking. I'm saying all her words. I went to squawking mostly because she said it hurt. It hurt bad, but it wasn't like I hadn't fell down on rocks before. But she said mostly because I dumped that bucket. She says, I didn't know if I was not going to get a whopping because I dumped that whole bucket of coal oil just right there. We went rolling down the hill and dumped out whatever, I don't know what kind of can it was. Okay, so there was that. And she said, Daddy was over there either hitching mules or in the barn or close enough to hear me, Didn't know what happened. Well, he came running. And she said, well, he saw that I just hurt my knee real bad. He picked me up and carried me up to the house and started, messing around on it. Time-wise, she wasn't sure if it maybe went or swelled real bad or whatever. She said, well, I don't know. I guess his scare, why Mama, she set bones on those boys. She could do everything. She was midwife. She was, she could set bones. She could treat for consumption. She could, pour kerosene down you or have you gargle it for sore throat or whatever, and all they did. And she said, I don't know why Daddy just took it in his head, but maybe he was hitching up mules already to do something or whatever. But she said he finished up and they bundled me up, put me in that wagon, He took me down the hill and took me all the way to Old Doc, to the doctor right here in Mountain View. And there's a cute little piece in there about that too, but I want to finish back by saying that after she finished the story, she said, now that I think about it, I guess, well, maybe it's because I was just his only daughter and he thought I might not walk again. And then again, I couldn't be as much help as I always had to be with the rest of them boys if I couldn't walk. So she said, that's the only thing I can think of, that Daddy might have taken me to the doctor to make sure I could walk again so I could continue being, she didn't say all this part, but I'm thinking, so you continue being the second slave of the household. They had to be. That's how they all had to be for stuff.
Hmm.
But she said, I said, so what did the doctor say or do, or however I asked it? She said, well, he set me up on a table. She said, I was squawking so I just wouldn't quit squawking. She said, I squawked all the way there. And she said, I just remember, or I went to squawking again, or whatever it was. She said, I was probably scared. None of us ever been to a doctor. You know, it's mom and daddy that treated us. So probably because she didn't know what he was going to do. And she said, he had this thing hung around his neck. I knew what they did, those things. They wasn't going to hurt me. But she said, I still, you know, I didn't want him scaring me. She says, I was a holding my knee and rocking. She's demonstrating. And I was a holding my knee and I'm a rocking and I'm a squawking. And she said, pretty soon, and I wouldn't let him touch it, you know, kind of thing. And she's spredaddled like on the table like this. Pretty soon, she said, you know that little hammer they use to test you on your, you know, below your knees? He made out like he's gonna hit my bad knee, you know, and it scared me to death. What he did was tap my other knee, so I went over and held that knee, and then he could get his hands on the knee that was bad. So you're a smart doctor, huh? You know, it's like you didn't have to worry about a lawsuit then. And she said, anyway, that was a cute part about that thing. So other than, I guess, probably a terribly bad bruised kneecap, and I'm sure it was busted open. There was blood too and all that kind of stuff. She was probably laid up a little while, but she said he didn't do nothing. She said it wasn't like it was broke or nothing, or, you know, nothing he could do anything about. And she said, now, I don't know how much money that cost Daddy, but, you know, back home we went. So wasn't that cute? But it really tells a story of how much, goodness knows how much work. So that's what Aunt Louise was about. Talk to work long and hard and without complaint and all. And for the most part, you know, be in a nursery, you know, forever and I. And, you know, when she did get married, that was obviously a guy she met in Oklahoma Territory.
What was his name? I know it was Brownlee.
No, that was her second husband. Her first husband, she actually divorced from. That is the father of her two sons, and he was full blood. I'm pretty sure she always said Cherokee. Jim Cherry. Jim Cherry. And her first son was Arthur Joe Cherry. And her second son was Gary Wayne Cherry. And, of course, they've always carried that name. But after the move to New Mexico, I don't know about her comings and going. Like, did she remain in Oklahoma? I think there was some movement. I think the guy was, besides being a full-blood Indian, he was kind of like an arounder and a hard drinker and probably abusive. Aunt Louise didn't talk much about that, but probably an abusive man. But I just don't know the timing. Gary and Arthur Joe, I don't think they're that close in age. I mean, for the time, you know, I think they were a few years apart, because she said he's always gone. You know, he's always just take off. You didn't know if he's going to come back or not. One of those typical things. And I guess he like did oil and gas, you know, and just got on as a laborer wherever. You know, most men really did that then if they didn't have some degree or something. And that's what he did. But because he drank, he was not dependable. She didn't know. So she started waitressing. That's what she'd do when she could, surrounding the timing of the two babies. And maybe she was living with enough, you know, with grandma and grandpa at the time, some. I don't know where it was, because she was very close to that first cousin Hazel that I talked about, that pretty much she married and pretty much stayed right there in Oklahoma and Okemah all her life. So maybe there were times, because even when we went on the trip, when we went to see Aunt Betty on Mama's side in Oklahoma before we went on to Arkansas, to Timbo, we had already planned, and Aunt Louise knew she wanted to spend a couple of days with Hazel, and she did. And so some of her early years, especially being left alone and waitressing and whatever, I don't know much more than that, except she was very close to Hazel. I'm pretty sure they were close in age, along with, whatever. And Hazel was a very, oh my gosh, I just remember her laugh. And Aunt Louise is like that too when she was in a comfortable place. Lots of laughs, constantly. And very accommodating and, etc. And of course, just like we're all Gillises, we like the outdoors, we like hunting, we like hunting arrowheads, and we like old rusty stuff. We like repurposing, and I did, especially when Aunt Louise moved to be closer to in old age after she lost her second husband, Charlie Brownlee. They were married lots and lots of years. But back to the first marriage, I think like she may have moved down to Texas for a time with him at some point, and then I did get a story out of her after she was in New Mexico most recently in New Mexico. When I did ask her, and some of our running around, we'd make little trips to Chloride here and there. We'd just go out hunting the hills and things, and enjoyed that totally. So sometimes I'd get those little stories. And I think I did ask then about when did you divorce? And she might have even said a date. I haven't retained that. But she said I was, and she waitressed in Hatch too. So when Grandma and Grandpa moved to Hatch and were actually farming in Hatch in New Mexico, she at some point in between some of the moves when Jim showed back up or didn't or whatever else, moved here. And we've got some of the black and white pictures when Aunt Louise was here. And I remember her from my early potty training days, even Aunt Louise being around for like an extended time. I was very comfortable with her. I had baby time with her, toddler time with her, lots. Really when Mother and Daddy were living and having the first three girls in that little camper trailer with no bathroom, Aunt Louise was there several times or extended times that I remember. I have very early memories of her, and her first fussing at sometimes the grown yet unmarried men that were still there and around, because they love to play with kids too, etc. And sometimes she'd come and catch them throwing me to sky high and catching me again and stuff, with most little kids usually like, or whatever. But she knew what could happen. They were probably getting really rough, etc. And I have early memories from that too. But so she was a protector, even with all the basically hard work raising her boys alone and all of that. And she said, when I asked her, when we were out hunting around arrowheads one day, I asked her about that when she divorced and why, or like I said, I suspected it. There were hints, innuendos of abuse besides being left. And or he'd come and then he'd say he'd send money back and he never would, and she wasn't quite sure if he'd moved on from that address because she wouldn't get no word when she wrote, and things like that. Horrible existence. And well, so she tried to keep him together with her little bit of waitressing. And she said she was working at here's a tie back to current woman still living. She was working at the Bluebird Cafe, which I still remember from way early childhood, in the middle of Hatch. And a lawyer used to come in. She said his name then. I don't remember what that was. And knew her situation, or kept, over an extended period, ask a little bit here, ask a little bit why you here, whatever, and still knowing she was still wearing a wedding band and things like that. And he'd probably sweet on her, or at least thought, how pitiful or something. But she said she remembered finally he used to ask about Arthur, Joe, the boys, or whatever was happening at the time. And, well, are you going to go on like this, or, what are you going to do? And Aunt Louise told him, well, I'm kind of conflicted. I don't like the idea of, divorce, especially me having to do that kind of thing. Or now, how would you go about that? That's how would you go about that if you had to divorce somebody and you didn't even know where he was, kind of a thing. So him being a lawyer, she said, he kind of gave her some clues and said, I'll be glad to help you. You make that decision and you let me know. If you need help in going ahead with that, if that's your decision, I'll help you out any way I can. And she said, I gave that some thought for a while, and I went to him or told him when he's in for breakfast or something next time. She said, yeah, I need that help, and didn't go any further with it than that. That's when she divorced. And then quite a bit later on, other moves elsewhere, which she's probably just waitressing, etc. I know Arthur Joe, as a older teenager, came to live with Grandma and Grandpa, also on the farm, to farm, be fed by, kind of feed himself sort of thing, be fed by Grandma and Grandpa, and had, still the growing boys. He could go hunting with them, he could whatever, so that was kind of like a win-win situation, both sides, to help Aunt Louise out while she still had the younger Gary at home and just had one to take care of. And I don't remember, I'm sure there's a story, but I don't remember how she met Charlie Brownlee, but they got married and he was her husband from then on. And when Arthur Joe and Gladys, let me put this piece in. Arthur Joe was in the Navy. That's Aunt Louise's oldest son, as you'll recall from the earlier session. He's in Hawaii, either stationed or stopped by or something. He met Gladys. I need to find out what Gladys's maiden name is, last name. He met Gladys, who was a 100% Hawaiian hula dancer. Later on, I don't know how, because I don't think, no, right then she did. Yeah, I know why. She had her own, what do they call them? Troupe. I think Aunt Louise always said troupe. She had her own troupe. They did contracts and they traveled and they went places, besides just staying around, and they did, hula shows. But that's how he met her. I don't know how the romance developed or whatever else, but Gary Wayne, then the younger, also signed up, went to service, and because Arthur Joe and Gladys were either engaged or married already, I'm not sure, but he got to go to Hawaii, or maybe that was one of his planned, what do they call them, R&R deals, and got to go to the set of Elvis's Blue Hawaii, because Gladys and her troupe are in Blue Hawaii. I always wanted to get that old DVD or something and see if, they didn't used to list credits like they do now. I mean, with everything under the sun, from every prop and lighter and whatever, and caterer and whatever. But that would be very interesting to know if and how, because they're probably not the only troupe. There were lots of hula dancers in Blue Hawaii. But I thought, how cool is that? That's a cool story.
Yeah.
So now, where was that going for the first? When I said about
we're talking about Aunt Louise's. Yeah.
I think. Oh yes, I know where that was going. Because I think that was well accepted. I don't know that Aunt Louise got to personally meet Gladys until they moved stateside. Well, maybe he had a R&R or whatever, and they came stateside. But I'm thinking they were already married or something like that. But they moved to L.A. and they've been in L.A. ever since. What spot, I don't know. But they had a son pretty early on. I'm thinking, And it was kind of like Arthur Joe with moving in with Grandma and Grandpa way back when. But this situation, as best I remember the bits and pieces, were that that their little boy, that Arthur Joe was maybe signed up for another tour or something, that he was gone, and those periods when he was gone, Gladys still wanted to tour. You
Hmm.
know, obviously that was her profession, still money coming in, and why sit there and be lonely all by yourself, etc. But I can't take along my little boy,
Hmm.
on the tours. So, however that got worked out, basically was that Charlie said, "That's my." I can remember Charlie to this day always saying, "That's my boy." His grandson, his step grandson, was what's his name? Was what his name is. Troy Dean. His name is Troy Dean. So he's half Hawaiian and half Gillis, half something else. No, that you figure that out genetically. You can do that, and he really did live with help out, and so he and Charlie and Aunt Louise and Troy Dean were super super close, and Troy Dean remained that way into adulthood and with his kids. I used to call their names too. Them I've seen once or twice. Those things. Anyway, that was that circle, and that's what I wanted to say about Aunt Louise.
Hmm.
She's raising a first grandson, basically. So how many boys is that? 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 boys. That basically she raised.
Which was the opposite of your parents having only girls.
Yeah,
Was that hard
yeah.
on your dad?
Pretty
Did he
fun.
ever want a son?
Oh, that's a good question because I've told people just outright without them asking. Daddy never made. I've for years and years, till probably I was about 13. I wanted to be a boy, just from the standpoint of I love farming. I love the rough out stuff. I like to go hunting. All of that. I think I had very balanced. Mother kept me. I learned to sew. I learned to cook. Blah blah blah. You know, uh, but nothing more did I enjoy than on the daddy side, except the scary stuff, which a grown man should have been doing, his handyman, not a little bitty old girl, you know, some stuff like that. But,
Hmm.
not terribly unique to the day. And Mama said all I did was pick on Reba and Paula, who were kind of like twins, and as far as getting along, wanted to play the same thing, do the same thing, etc. And I was just aggravating them. Mother said all the time, just aggravating. And I remember some of that, but some was unwarranted. But that's in any family. But what was the question?
Was it hard on your dad?
It was hard on my dad, and I felt sorry. That's why I did that. I didn't mean to bring it back to me, but of course it was hard on Daddy. I think Daddy didn't get to buy the rental farm, sharecropper farm they were on of Uncle Tom Martin's, once again, because Grandma and Grandpa Gillis had retired. They couldn't farm. Had a big garden for a long time. Remembered all that, but cows and the chickens and everything else, kind of went away, and it was just all farming, etc. Because Daddy, when he and Mama moved there, he was the only son at the time come out of the service and truly start farming with Grandpa Gillis.
Hmm.
So then it was that Tom was ready to sell the place, and of course offers it to Daddy first. And between Mama thinking futuristically, probably quite practically, Daddy wouldn't have probably said out loud that I would have known anything about, that, well, it'll take a lot of money for paying for, you know, other equipment operators or other things when you don't have a homegrown person that can do these kinds of things, because Mom had already made it pretty clear. She did some, but she said, I'm not no tractor grade driver, and you may want to cut this out or not. But I ain't no Rena Franzoy. Rena Carson's her name, but she was born a Franzoy or whatever.
Hmm.
Now she worked like a man and could, you know, and and everybody knew it. Of course, everybody knew it. Everybody in the valley, and farming practices or not, and everything. So she said, I know Rena, and you're not going to make my girls know Rena either. So, so it was a bit of partial, but as far as making the decision for daddy, it's like, well, I'm not likely to have boys, so that's probably not a good deal. So they moved on to, the Thurman place rental. And it was hard because he did have to have help from time to time, and most of the help, there's stories with that, stole from him or whatever else. He was part of when we were still in the home place, he was part of the Bracero program. I remember that well, and being terrible with that. But personally, I always felt ashamed that I wasn't strong enough or that I could be the boy, to do what daddy need done. I was going on 12, I think was the age when we actually moved over to the Thurman place. Cross the river, a couple of miles away as the crow flies. Hello. And I remember crying myself to sleep because I did not want to leave that farmhouse and my ditch and my tree and my rickety old holy wooden bridge over the canal and I don't know. I was just, my hummingbirds, my 4 o'clocks, whatever. It's like, that's my place, I thought I was moving to the moon. I might as well have been. That's a pretty good age kid to be feeling that way, So, but as far as being required and asked to do some work, I think daddy had a funny balance there. He was trying to please mother or get away with not making us equipment drivers, like the cotton picker, the tractors, the whatever, somewhat on his lap or whatever else kind of thing. But them days to hook up a trailer or unhook it and things like that, oh my gosh, that took a lot of muscle. I'm sure I can, even by rolling bells, which the small bells at the time, we went to big bells, but the small bells at the time would come out when averaged like 78 pounds, and you had to roll those so they didn't get moldy if you'd had a bit of moisture or whatever in the fields, by the hundreds. They didn't have machinery that did several steps and pick them up at the same time or whatever else. And I had to, knee them up to at least first level the person on the trailer or in the barn when they're stacking, I didn't weigh, but full grown. Well, I weighed 97 when I got married. Hello. So I had to be mostly muscle, just from doing. But so he didn't require of us some things. Sometimes he would, well, for instance, when we had pigs that we were growing, that us girls got the money off of when they went to market in Deming. It was kind of like our new shoes, new dresses or dress material, special things for, as we're growing up, and you need a formal for rainbow girls or something, things like that I'm sure mothers generate, piano lessons, etc., just generating stuff like that. Mother was always finding a way, and the pigs was one answer to that for 3 girls. Reba needs a cheerleading outfit, and just the normal stuff, to call it extras or whatever. So we had to feed the pigs, which wasn't that big of a deal. Of course, feed the horses, any that pinned or came, feed and water and those kinds of things. But that daddy usually grew a field of blue corn for grinding. Now that's specialty, right? Blue corn tortillas are my favorite. It has a sweet flavor. I'd rather have that. We called it pig corn because that's what we grew to specifically feed the pigs. We also waited until the pigweeds, which were prickly and used for some real good herbal medications. I don't remember stalk and or leaves or whatever, but they're kind of prickly or whatever, and you can get very itchy or sticky, and some of those little spines around the leaves could literally be in your hands. So we usually tried to have a pair of gloves or something, or know how to grab those. literally they'd grow 6 foot tall just everywhere around the farm or whatever. But you'd wait because, big old stalks and on up, lots of good quality food for the pigs. So we would pull those and just throw those over, then yump up on those, so that. But Daddy, probably at some auction, I don't know where, he came up with a big old corn grinder, and it's like you have to be a man to turn that handle. Well, as we're whining and complaining, but we can't turn it, or come get it. If you get it going, then we can, two of us, keep it turning. But it had to have a start, big old thing. And he said, you girls can figure that out. So using your body, you could do that. But one of you had to, and it was draw straws. One of you had to drape yourself over this handle that came out, and really it was about that wide on this side. I mean, it was a two-handed hold for a grown person. So one of us had to drape our body over that at the right, time. The others lift, and with the body weight of the other one, then it'd start to go down with enough momentum to where we could all grab and get it going to grind the pig corn. How's that for a story? But I'm sure my daddy wished like heck that he had at least one strong boy, that he could trust, teach, whatever. Even the cousins that we played with were all girls, once they got moved there and got it big enough to do anything. Girls. Yeah, till 58, was it? 58 was when Dan, the first boy, was born to Uncle Lonnie in the Gillis family. That's my poem reflex. Yeah. Poor Daddy. So he didn't get to buy a farm and keep farming.
Did he ever...
Go ahead. Next question. You didn't even need any questions. You know how I am.
Well, did he ever tell you any war stories? Because I know he fought in World War II, but you were the firstborn, and you weren't born until 5 years after.
Not until... Because we didn't care. We were girls. We didn't think to ask those questions. We weren't that concerned. Not until... sometimes there were bits and pieces when there were the family gatherings and there was, 3 or more of the guys, there, sometimes all the guys. You'd overhear this, that, and the other, but not for complete stories. Uncle Leonard was the only true storyteller in the bunch, to where he would, start and go through, and he'd tell jokes and stuff too. My daddy never told a joke that I recall. Quiet. But after he lost Mama, yeah, that was almost an obsession. 'Cause Mama had already, I think, brought his ship picture that he has that from the bedroom to the living room. So that was just there. And lost Mama, and then he wouldn't come in and visit. He's looking right up there at that ship thing, and then he started talking. If it was a guy, Everett Brawley come by to visit. The preacher come by to visit. Joe Paul, whatever his last name was, Joe Paul come by to visit. Any talkers or listeners or whatever, he started doing stories, and some of those I got to hear way late, because I'd be there on my day to come up and clean at the house and do things, and do some cooking and just be there to give Reba a break, for Daddy. That would primarily after his stroke, where he wasn't getting around that good and stuff, and that's where I heard the stories. Not till Mother might have told a few that maybe Daddy had told her, but that wasn't in depth either. And it didn't seem like that I guess, remember that book that Tom Brokaw wrote, The Greatest Generation? They just came back not talking
Mm.
about that, full stories. That's why you see all those documentaries interviewing the 90-year-olds, that were pilots and, you know, ship people, and the ones that, were uh, prisoners of war, and just all the stories and everything. They never told most of their families, and then sometimes they'd interview like the son, the whatever, and they're like, Dad never talked about that, or I never knew that.
Mm.
That's exactly how it was, especially with girls.
Mm.
Plus, I'm sure he thought it's like, well, nobody wants to know about that. They're not interested in that, and some of it, I'm sure they wanted to forget about. But um, just more, well, like, here's the only story like that would come from Mama that Daddy would validate or whatever. The gold outline of the one of his front teeth.
Mm-hmm. I remember that.
Mm-hmm. And that was as much as Mama's chin mole. They both had opportunity to have that changed. Mother's mole go away at some point, not the same time, I think, and Daddy's gold tooth to go away. And they both said, well, that's kind of like me, and that's in every picture I ever took, and that kind of thing. So they both opted. It's like, no, why would I want to do that kind of thing? So uh, I did hear the story, but it was kind of like him elaborating, or sometimes later on, I'd say, yeah, Daddy, what about your tooth? Tell that, and then he'd go on and relate to whoever was visiting and tell that. Okay, but when we were young, came from Mama. We never thought much about it. It's like, how'd Daddy get a gold, the gold tooth? Is that real gold? Like, hey, let's do something with that. um, they had I don't think it was a drill. I think it was a real thing. There's, pilots coming in or whatever. Daddy was a gunner on, it was a small ship, but it was a gunner type ship. Whatever, I don't know the names and all. But outside, he either loaded or backed or set in the seat, or they switched off or whatever else. But live action on that kind of thing. And it was a nighttime, the not whistles, what do you call it, the horn that goes off,
The steam.
And, well, yeah, whatever it was that they used, that was a warning. It's like, get to your stations, do what you're supposed to do. And he was on duty for gun, the manning of the gun, those kind that you sit in and turn and whatever, what size, I don't know, the calibers and all those kinds of things. But he the way he would put it was, well, you went a running, try to put your life vest on and get to your station, And he said, if you had a problem, or if you got hung up or whatever else, then you forget the life vest, but get to your station. I've heard him say it that way. But he said, evidently the last poop deck washer, or the last one that had to go down a manhole, he said, well, it was nighttime that you're doing your running to your station. And he said, for some reason, somebody forgot to put the top back on. I'm sure he called it a different name. And the cover back on. And he said, I was at a dead run, and all of a sudden I wasn't at a dead run, I was down, and he hit on his face, took that tooth out, and, up like that. He said, pretty bad knockout. He said, of course, I went directly below at the ship's doctors or whatever else there, and he said, I don't think he described in detail that they saved his tooth and did the gold thing right then. I probably think it was so fresh they saw that they could shove it back up there. It was his real tooth. And look how many years that lasted. I think they put the gold on later, and then he had to heal up, but needless to say, he didn't get to his station that night, so it's kind of a funny story. So that's how he came to have a what do you call it? A framed front tooth.
So was he was in the Army, wasn't he?
Navy. We're talking about boat.
See, well, yeah, I've always heard, he was on a boat, but I could have sworn it said Army on his discharge.
If it did, it's one of those other goofy, and they got name wrong, birth date wrong, at various documents and stuff. No, he was definitely a Navy guy.
So what is his real birthday? The 27th or the 17th?
The 27th.
Mm-hmm.
We fought that clear up until the death certificate. It's like, are you kidding me? Handwritten copies, old type copies with 6 carbons. And
it's a phone. It's telemarketers.
Oh, okay. You're kidding me. I mean, we all said it. Me, Reba, Paula, whoever was there. Mother ad nauseum before we had to take up the hunt. It's like, it's a computerized age. We all live with that. This is like a data entry correction. But oh no, the mistake was made back here. So it's like, oh no, don't have that authority. The mother wrote letters. No birth certificates. Hello. One was made up much later on. Nobody had a baby up the holler by a midwife and got your birth certificate. If you thought about it, yeah. If it worked, yeah. Later on, or whatever, or to solidify the name, and then go have it, put in front of the judge and whatever, Ugh. 27th, September 27th, I knew this.
20 something.
Yeah.
I have it somewhere.
Yeah, I know you do. I had it in my head for a while when we were dealing with the doctor records and the VA. We tried to get it done through the VA. We tried to get it done through Medicare. We tried to get Social Security. No, nobody's taking it. No. Oh, how terrible would that be? A 90-year-old man, we're just trying to get his real birthday down here. I think early years, he and Mama with crop loans or whatever else, when they started being stupid with validation on stuff, seriously, I think they had to fight the fight from the actual level of John Daniel or Johnny Gillis. I'm telling you, that was a real thing for the longest time before computers. Fight the fight. It's like, what else do I have to do to say? I think my grandma named him John Daniel, as you know how that goes with your genealogical research, because Daniel was what? Their grandpa, great grandma, it was her side of the family. Daniel was very close there in that name. Father, grandfather, whatever to her. Daniel was there, and she didn't use it with any of the other boys. I'm pretty sure that John Daniel was what he was named, but got called Johnny, very common, kind of thing. But the whole point was, and I understand that I'm called Marie. Am I not Marie? I had to be 30 before I got to be called Marie, but I had my reasons for that. And I'm sure Daddy did too. When he went into the Navy, he did not want to be John Daniel. He wanted to be Johnny Gillis, no middle name. So then there's some of those records or stuff, etc., that'll, instead of saying none, it had in. So then all of a sudden it was like, is it Neil? Is it Nathan? Is it, Mother and Daddy fought that all the way through. Just because of people putting stuff down.
What about your mom's childhood?
Are you bored yet? Are you really bored yet, Rigby? Let me know when.
But what about the Fulbrights? Because they've been in Oklahoma for a while, haven't they? Did your mom ever tell you anything about her childhood?
Yeah, some, and no, some. Being girls, she come. Yeah, we had several stories. I know Aunt Betty just thought she was mean, and my last phone call to Aunt Betty, and I'm pretty sure she was lucid. I made a joke referring back to something that has been said many times and whatever, and she says, that's because she's just mean. And that was only a year ago, probably, that I talked to Aunt Betty on the phone. She's kind of pretty much bedridden, I think, now.
Hmm.
And I don't know about her currently, even these last few months. We should keep in better touch. But yeah, there was, let's see, Mother told a story, because we're girls, that kind of thing. She told stories of like when they cut out, when Mother was teaching us to, of course, we always knew Mother sewed for us. Mother sewed our dresses and all those kinds of things. And Joe Muir, old Joel Muir, we knew from the little girls because Mother worked for him. He had his store right next door to her dad, Pete, Daddy Pete to us, Fulbright. What's his Manuel Lafayette? Never called that, or never called initials.
Yeah, where did Pete come from? Do you know?
I don't know. I mean, but he, as a store owner and butcher and all that, people came in. I remember on our visits that we were there, and we're little girls or whatever else. Pete, what, depending on who it was, or what, Pete. So I guess all adults and or whatever. Maybe he didn't like Manuel Lafayette. That could have some implication way back when, right? Or just too complicated, or maybe it sounded a little ostentatious to him. Who knows? Because I don't know him except in later years, that kind of thing. But no, Mother would say things in reference to, that's because we're going to, why do we it's our church dress. Why do we have to get all dressed up? Because I'm taking you to see Joe Muir. We're going to go visit with him. Who's Joe Muir? Well, then, of course, after the first visit, we knew. And until he died, we tried to know. And I've got some memories of 2 different stores that he was at. Because he had long since moved out of Grandpa's store, or by Grandpa's store in Castle, and moved to a larger store in Okima. And I still remember the time of playing in his room, because he could even sleep there. I don't think he lived there, or maybe he did. With some steep stairs and a loading dock that we played on while we're waiting for Mother to visit with Joe Muir. But she worked for him, I guess, in deference to working for her own dad, or maybe one of his boys was working there at the store or something. I don't know. But he was more of a dry goods material, things like that, to where maybe he had a different customer base, and he liked to have a young, as he said, a young, pretty high school age girl, to work there at the store for him. So, and cashier and all that kind of stuff, and clean him. But I remember him then, and I remember he'd always take our little faces and give a big old whiskery, slobbery kiss. Wasn't crazy about that. But we knew that he was special to Mama. She still thought way well of him. And I remember on one visit, him just making over, it's called us the prettiest little girls. Once I think he took a picture. He had a camera, and he took a picture. And, but whatever ages we were, he wanted Mama to go to the material section and pick out, 3 bolts of cloth. I think he said bolts. I don't know. I don't remember. Maybe she, parried with him a little bit and asked him to, I won't need more than 3 yards apiece, those little skirts with the petticoats and all that. And I still remember those dresses. It was a little tiny check. Mine was purple and white check. Reba's was, I can't remember now, Reba and Paula's, it was red and yellow. Yellow and white check, purple and white check, red and white check. Mine was the purple and white check. But we all, and Mother did. And I can remember him there at the counter asking her, said, all I'm asking you to do, Helen Ruth, and everybody used their middle name then, called, Now, all I'm asking you to do, Helen Ruth, is you send me, when you get them dresses made up, you just send me a picture of them pretty little girls. So I'm pretty sure that she made that happen. Surely she did. But that was Easter dresses one year because of Joe Muir.
Hmm.
At Christmas time, that's the only time when we were little girls that we ever went, back there because Daddy was not in the middle of farming. So, yeah, I remember that. And what else? She worked for a lawyer. And a couple stories she told about that. Maybe it was because we came home from, I don't remember, I think she borrowed a typewriter from Aunt Frances, for somebody. Anyway, we came home from school one day, and there she was at the dining room table in the Thurman house. Man, she was typing away, lickety-split. It was long before we knew how to type, and it was just like, what is she doing? And boy, she can do it fast, kind of thing. So I think we got a couple of stories out of that. Well, that's because, and she did shorthand, of course, at the time. And so we got some stories out of that. But I think that was for whatever length of time she worked for that lawyer in Okemah as a high schooler. She played basketball. A lot of girls' basketball. In fact, I remember her saying that girls' basketball was a lot more popular. Hey, that's because they wore short shorts then. Nearly, I mean, they're baggy, but in between. But it's like, oh my gosh, there would be no way you'd be making up shorts like that for girls to wear, even our age, So that's probably why it's so popular. I didn't talk back and say that to her, but yeah, she's got that one. Did you get that picture?
I've never seen her.
We wanted that for her funeral, and I'm thinking that somehow or another it wasn't found, and then very quickly found. But I was looking for that, because I remember that one very well. That impressed me, actually. But we got that story when we were old enough to go through the albums and stuff. Well, we did that from early, but to question us like, yeah, there's all these girls lined up with the basketball, kind of thing. So she played. That was the only sport that she ever played or whatever. And her best friend, all growing up and through then early marriage, was Audrey. Don't remember her last name.
I do have. There's pictures of her.
Yeah.
Of Audrey.
And they were together in that basketball picture too. She told stories back to the sewing part. Is that I don't know where you're griping. That's the way you should be talking to her. I don't know. It was pinning. All the patterns, pinning. And if somebody was on the dining room table pinning, you got the floor, pinning. And then, when we got carpet, it was like you're pinning it to the dang carpet, And you had to move the bear rug out of the way to get your share of the floor to, pin your whatever. I don't know why you're griping. We used to sit on the bed because floors were too dirty, I guess, or they thought floors were too dirty a place to be pinning new material and patterns. And we laid scissors on enough of the pattern to start cutting. I said, scissors? First of all, how did you have so many scissors? And I mean, I was a pinner. I wanted like every 2 inches a pin so that I didn't have a crazy cut or didn't get around a corner or an indent or a seam well. So I couldn't figure that one out, but I guess that's what they did, or at least they did in her family. And little stories about Aunt Betty didn't want to sew because I wish I could think of the term she used, because Helen Ruth is kind of like always acting so fancy for what she's sewing. She goes to school and talks about what she made and what she got to do and pick out. She won't even let me borrow it. It's hilarious. I'm trying to make Aunt Betty's faces, but anyway, that was that. 2 sisters, and they were at the tail end of all the brothers, so, of course.
Well, she must have been pretty good. There's a picture of her in a Mexican dress sewing contest.
That's when she made my squad dress. I'm the little girl standing on the table. And she was always mad at me because I wouldn't smile. Pictures and whatever. Sometimes I did, but anyway. So she finally got me when the other 2 older girls, Camille Gary and the blonde-headed girl, I can't remember her name, But I had to pick my squad dress up and do this and smile. And I was already, it's like, oh, enough already. And she wanted me to put my feet closer together. It's like, and what? Fall off this table? Fold. I wasn't saying that. I'm sure I was thinking that. I'm just doing it from enough of how these things went. Because she was a, Paul and I have talked this talk. Mother really needed to act in small-time theater or something like that. She was creative. She did very good sewing and whatever else. But she also was always wanting to put little girls on display and have them be picture perfect perfection. And she's always mad at me because it made me mad, or I got irritated. It's like, I don't want to do that, you know. Some shyness, and others like, enough already, you know. It's like, I'm the oldest. I had to be dressed and whatever at first, and then what did I have to do? Sit, be still, not get dirty, not do nothing, not pet the dog, not nothing to wait on. Paula get all fixed, and then Reba get all fixed so she could do the picture. So on the nice part, that's the last chip I'm going to have. You better have the last ones. The nice part was that, you know, Mother probably needed more of a creative outlet than she got with club. And, of course, you know, she always taught, you know, Vacation Bible School and helped out and whatever else is. But any of those little, and those were always club-oriented kind of things. The sewing contest was big, always. 4-H and whatever else. 4-H, home economics stuff, and all. Mama was right there. And a little bit later, like when I got to be about 11, I think that's the earliest that you could enter the contest yourself or whatever. She wanted to do all that through me and me be Helen Ruth, and I felt it then. And there was even, I mean, I was already sassy enough and big enough to say, you know, I'd rather be John Daniel, not Helen Ruth. Then I used the John Daniel on purpose. Is this part you wanted on your lovely little question answer and stuff for our posterity? Yeah, reality. This is real family reality. Memories, well, I got them. Get them quick.
Well, I know you said you were in Rainbow Girls. Grammy was in Rainbow Girls too.
Until I threw a fit.
Well, was your mom in Rainbow Girls?
No, she was in. Good question, Rig. Because no, she was in. I think it was called Rebecca's Daughters. That was the orchestra for girls where she was. I'm sure that, you know, I don't know if there was a Rainbow Girls yet. I really don't. But where she was, and Castle, because I think it was pretty early, was before they moved to Okima. Rebecca's Daughters. Wasn't like Daughters of the Revolution, right? That's the one you hear of. It was Rebecca's Daughters. So I'm not sure. I mean, obviously Christian oriented. And her mama went to Church of Christ. Maybe it was like we had in Baptist, where I grew up, it was GA Girls, Girls Auxiliary. That was the, you know, and it's kind of like a church Girl Scouts, you know. So we were Girls Auxiliary, the GAs. She was Rebecca's Daughters. She never told me nothing about that, except I think that was, I don't know, that might have been a combo of secular, non-secular. Actually, I shouldn't even say it that way. It was just different then. Then it was that, you know, the, not spoken of this way, but the nice girls, the proper girls or whatever, the girls from good families, families that cared or whatever else. You did those things in the community because, you know, that then you were seen as, you know, coming from a good family.
Yeah. Well, and Rainbow Girls, I thought Rainbow Girls were like a function of the Freemasons.
They are.
Eastern
Star. Eastern Star is what they billed themselves out then. And those were my early days of research, Rig. I really had some without even knowing what I was doing, except that, wait a minute. So I had to put two and two together. because as a freshman, that's when you can first join and enter Rainbow Girls, or maybe it's age 12 and or, you know, kind of thing, whichever, freshman or 12 years old. That's 6th grade, isn't it? I'm not sure how that worked. Maybe it was 13 and or freshman in school. Is how it was run there. And Mrs. Barnes was in honcho in Eastern Star. Didn't know that before because she was our PE teacher. And I think she taught math or whatever too. She was from back east. That was fun. Boston area, I think, somewhere like that. And she called all this girl. We still laugh about that today. She called, and it irritated us like crazy, but you dared not say anything. Donner, Poller, Reber. That's who we were. Anything ending today. That's how it came out to our ears. And you had roll call every class. Hello. Donner? Present. Paula? Paula should be interviewed. She could tell these kind of stories funnier than me. But anyway, because she was in Eastern Star, I learned, I think you kind of had, besides the fact that, yeah, I want to join, or my mama wants me to join, or whatever, you had to kind of have a okay from someone that was in Eastern Star. And
like a sponsor.
A sponsor. So mine was Mrs. Barnes, and she probably did every girl, you know. She taught every girl, so why not, you know. So it's like, I didn't want to. I was foot dragging. I didn't like the whole idea of playing dress up and being so pigeonholed into doing certain things, certain times, certain ways, addressing girls that you wouldn't give the time of day at school because they're so nasty, or nasty mouth, or said stuff about you, or tried to slam your fingers in the locker doors just because they could, or other things like that, you know, because our high school was all together, you know, from freshman to senior and all of that, not a lot of division. And you knew everybody and their family, you know, quite more interesting and detailed and you know, in a little bitty old town, you know. Well, Rainbow Girls just added an extra element to that, you know. And it's like, I don't want to get dress up and play nicey with these girls that hate me at school, you know, or I can't stand them or their attitude or whatever. And then you have to be bowing to them and yes, thank yous and whatever else. And the memorization, because it already, you know, and I'm on since a Christian and trying to do more Bible study. I mean, that was important to me even then. But a lot of scripture being quoted, that's primarily what you did at your various stations and how you answered certain things and whatever else. Well, what wasn't spoken of then, and Mother wouldn't even have thought of, there was wrong doctrine being pushed then. I mean, when the basis, now most of those girls could care less and some didn't know. They were biblically illiterate to start with. Some went to Sunday schools and things and some didn't. But beyond that, I already knew where lines needed to be drawn for biblical doctrine, basically, you know, what's true, what's not true, what's dicey, what's, you know, it's like, no, you know, and that can't be truth here and not be truth there, and that, you know, it's, I know, you know, so, and I just knew that in my core. So Mother and I started having a lot of fights then, and then it was, well, I'm not going to make you your formal, you know, because you had to have certain formal whatever, but I did end up with Betty Sue's formal. She wasn't a Rainbow Girls. It was like a dance formal or whatever, a white formal. I remember that, etc. But it was because Mama was mad that I was mad that, you know, the whole thing just went on forever. And part of it was a lot. One of her best friends was Betty Brawley, and Martha Brawley was in my. She's a little older by months in my class. But played with them all the time with them because our parents were together as couples all the time, dominoes, whatever, and clubs for the women, and cooking, and just friendship of canning, picking fruit trees, and all that kind of stuff. So a lot, constant kind of thing. And Martha Brawley was first born, and I was first born, and both of our mothers, it kind of seemed like no matter what was happening, whether it was school activity, Rainbow Girls, and Martha was going into Rainbows too, same time as me. It's kind of like, this doesn't, it just had a totally wrong feel. And I just didn't think it was right, and I probably didn't verbalize it well to Mother about, like, how dare I say it's not right? What do you mean it's not right? Kind of stuff. And when I'm talking about it's because they don't, it's probably without ever using the word biased or favoritism or things like that. The same teacher that recommends you, that teaches whatever, will not recommend beautiful, intelligent, nice so-and-so, because why? She's a Catholic girl. And no Hispanics allowed. That was another thing I knew. No Hispanics, no Catholics, and yet, and this is where it gets dicey, and I'll just say it, don't cut this part out, because I had to come to, maybe that's what the Lord was preparing for my 8 years of fight on this one, that all the Mormon girls who were basically white, they could participate and be there. Even some of the, as you get up to the other stations, especially like Worthy Advisor, the top nacho, there were literally cut and paste scripture kind of thing that was way out of line, with, Mormons, etc. And that's before I had done my deep dive, long before. But I just knew all this is not right. What's wrong with this picture? Don't you see it, Mother? None of the, how about, I'm trying to think of some names. I'm thinking of one now. She may still work for the post office. The most beautiful woman ever you wanted. And nice. She was like homecoming high school queens and things like that, for stuff in school. But no, she couldn't be in Rainbow Girls. Did they want to? I don't know, probably not, but you know what I'm saying. And then that meant that set you over here, so you're even more then don't be in the other clubs with these gals, or at least have your own little niche, even if you are in the same photo club, the drama club, the whatever, Not that I was in those, but I was in some. So it's just like, this is a wrecking ball, I thought, too, which I couldn't verbalize, the social structure of a little bitty town's one high school, and how you interact with people. And so I did not want to be part of that. I only made it to Faith. That's only like the first station. First, you're just, lady in waiting or something silly. I don't remember what, but as far as the stations, those are like Faith, Hope, blah, 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 on up to Worthy, whatever. It's like, whole dang thing isn't worthy. There's something really wrong with this. But when I got to Faith and did that well, and then maybe some other things happened, it was like our pajama parties or sandwich parties or whatever else. It's like I had some real ammo going on because I started studying even more, especially on those Mormon girls and that thing. And besides that, I think I presented some information about some of those Mormon girls that Mother wasn't aware of. And at the same time, on the good side, some really good review of some of the other Hispanic girls that would even further slice you off from,
Well, I just have one more question, because someone's coming to fix Mom and Dad's sink.
Really? Okay. Which sink?
In their bathroom. They're gonna switch out a hot water something. I don't know. But I noticed the other day that your great grandpa, Denver Hayes Jeffers. So Viola's dad didn't die until you were 8 years old. Did you ever meet him?
What a revelation.
Hmm.
I'm sure that looked great. Don't cut that out. No.
Hmm.
And I think I told you from my first cousin Linda, who's exactly the same age as me, and she's always been in Oklahoma, etc. I don't know if it was like in her dad was mother's brother Troy, one of the twins. His brother died when he was 12, pneumonia, I think they called it.
Hmm.
He was Roy, who he named his son after. No, but Linda told me the only piece of information I've ever had was that he was either on the border of, I'm forgetting my town name, either on the border of Missouri and Arkansas or the border of Oklahoma and Arkansas, whatever. I think I told you this over the phone once, that Linda said that he, in adulthood or later on, Roy and Linda and Roy, her brother, were both made aware of and were interested in the fact that he was a builder, a good masonry builder, and he built most of the businesses in that little town, or a lot of them, and certainly the first college. It may or may not have become a university, but it was a college, or further school of learning after high school, etc. He was supposed to build. So he may have been somewhat of a architect of the day, etc. But that's all I know, and no, I never met him. Never knew anything else but what Linda and Roy said in adulthood.
Yeah, he died on November 13th, so like, about a week after your birthday in 1958 in Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Okay, Fayetteville, Fayetteville is it. So that's the town. It was Fayetteville. Yeah. So presumably to this day, we could go to Timbo, we could go to Fayetteville, and see if there's still buildings standing that he did.
Mm-hmm.
You could research some of that. I would think some of that would
bet
be on
I
record.
could, actually. I should do that.
Yeah, and
let me take a note of that.
Another thing that let's see, that made me think that she said, "Well, babe, well, shoot, let's let it by." Coming out of that, no, very, very little. I didn't even know for sure how many sisters Grandma had. They just when they talked, or there was communication like that going around on our visits, or some other times, it's like we're visiting in Albuquerque with Aunt Rita and Aunt Lily, who came from a Jeffers woman as well, just like Mama. How many of those sisters there were? I didn't know that, so I know nothing else of that except body type or something. That would sometimes be what was spoken of.
I do have, and this could be more or less than there actually were, but she had 3 sisters, Wilma, Dorothy, and Ruth, and then a brother, William.
Oh, that's my Helen Ruth.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. Wilma and Dorothy sound familiar in name calling, but not Ruth.
Ruth B. I don't know what the B stands for.
Maybe they called her B.
Mm-hmm.
Just for fun. There are probably some interesting stories about that. A couple of those old photos with those big fat women. No, really. I think they were standing with Grandma Viola, way back. Weren't good photos or whatever else, like somebody's shoulders cut off or something. But I think they must have been 2 of the sisters. Maybe maybe Ruth
Violas.
died. Yes. I was just going to postulate maybe Ruth died early.
Actually, she did. She was 20
Oh my
when
gosh.
she died. 1907 to 1927.
My goodness. So see, those probably some good stories, but or possibly, if there was any hint of anything out of the whatever, it wasn't spoken of, I can tell you that. She ran off with somebody, got sick and died, or terrible. No, it could be nothing, but it'd be interesting to know what she died of or how she died so early like that.
Yeah, I don't think it says. Well, this may be her death certificate. It is.
Man, how do you get that stuff up so easy? Quickly. Oh my gosh.
Oh, you said big fat women. She died of diabetes.
Oh my word. Of course, you can have diabetes and not be big fat at all.
Yeah.
But, whoa.
Yeah, it says cause of death, diabetes. And then apparently they did a blood sugar test to confirm it.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So then that's a for real. Wow.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Thanks, Rig. No, those are, your puzzle pieces are just great. Can I cry like that guy last night on TV on Roots?
Yeah, I never knew that Grandma Helen had an Aunt Ruth.
Yeah, and nor did I guess. I might have heard it when I was a little bitty, but I sure didn't hear it in adulthood, or not enough to stick. Rigby, see, that's what makes people cry, is just like you learn truth that's truth, but I'm directly connected to that truth. Isn't that something? And then immediately your mind says, well, I'd like to know the whole story or more of the story or whatever else. So yeah, I think that's where the emotion comes in. Oh my gosh. What a lovely interview. I'm sure now I'll be called upon to give many. I hope you don't have to cut and paste too much. No, don't paste. Just cut.